Jackie Witzman here to take you through the week that was on HRTV. Mary Simons stops by Race Day to talk about the rerun Monet auction.
Well, right now you need to go to eBay and search the word Monet, M-O-N-E-I-G-H, and that's the sound of a horse and a combination of an artist's name, so that's how we came up with the name. And then there's 30, 40 paintings on the eBay site right now. If they do want to bid, though, they'll have to establish an eBay account.
What are some of the Monets up for bid of the 40?
You want the big names?
Let's go big.
Let's go with Cigar and Distorted Humor, Empire Maker, Funny Side, Kona Gold, who's recently passed away, and Lawyer Ron, who recently passed away, Medaglia d'Oro, the sire of Rachel Alexandra, Midnight Loot, the double Breeders' Cup winner. We've got Precious Passion, who just ran in the recent Breeders' Cup, and then, of course, Rags to Riches, Serena's Song, the Green Monkey, who made his fame with his $16 million sales price, and then we've got Tiz Now. Sensational just ran in the Breeders' Cup, and then we have some other breeds this year. We brought in some Percheron, a Mini Pony, we've got a Holsteiner, and so it's going to be a little different this year.
What kind of prices do you often find in the end, or closing bids on these Monets?
Well, our record was John Henry at over $5,500. And the bigger names, of course, go for more money. Dynaformer was popular last year. He brought in the most money in that auction. And then the lesser-known names will come in at maybe $200 or so. But it's all original abstract works of art, and part of it is tax-deductible, so that's an incentive.
Rachel Alexandra arrived at Fairgrounds to begin prepping for her 2010 campaign.
Rachel Alexandra, she's getting back into the swing of things out at Fairgrounds. She made it back to the track about a week or so ago at Churchill Downs and started training once again, and now she's in Louisiana getting ready to start off her 2010 campaign.
Which is going to be very exciting. They say she's bigger, and we always say this, and we're going to keep saying it, the usual maturation of a 3-year-old to a newly turned 4-year-old. Just the mental, the physical, the growth that happens in that time on the shelf, you can only imagine, because her campaign was fantastic. We have never seen a 3-year-old filly with a campaign like hers, not only beating boys, but going on to beat older boys, and you know what she's done and what she'll probably do next year. I mean, she would be my likely candidate for Horse of the Year next year. I mean, what else is out there right now?
Yeah, she's the early favorite, no question about it, without even knowing what they're going to do next with this filly.
Wouldn't it be interesting to have Jess Jackson back-to-back Horse of the Year with Curlin, and then back-to-back with Rachel if she were to take this year and come back the way we assume that she would?
It's possible.
Yeah.
She's feeling good.
Boy, is she. Look at this.
That's out at Fairgrounds.
That's the funny thing. As long as they stay calm enough, you can do a little less with them. But some of them are knocking down the stall, and they'll hurt themselves if they don't get the work or the race or whatever. And so she's in good hands.
Well, that was the case at Churchill Downs, that she went to the track earlier than they anticipated taking her because she was so far ahead of schedule. And
look how big she is. Look at the groom.
She does look different. I mean, she looks fuller than what she did
but to see that
last year,
groom
or this year,
looking so minuscule next to her, I mean, she is a monster.
Zenyatta gets a celebration fit for a queen at Hollywood Park.
After the 7th race at Hollywood, fans who attended the races had one last chance to get a close-up look at Zenyatta before she heads off to the breeding shed in Kentucky, as she was paraded around the racetrack under her regular exercise rider.
And there she is, just trotting along nicely next to the outrider, and boy, oh boy, she looks like she could run tomorrow.
I think she is out there to run.
She's wondering where Mike Smith is. She's got Steve Willard aboard her now, and Steve knows her better than he knows himself.
That's for sure. And you know, the debate is going to continue to rage on until January 18th, when we find out who is Horse of the Year, Rachel Alexandra or Zenyatta. And there will be an unhappy camp, in a large unhappy camp somewhere in the United States, no matter who it is. And, you know, as I thought about this, you know, they really both obviously deserve it, and I don't really feel like there should be more than one Horse of the Year, but I think the bottom line is, Zoe, I don't know if you feel the same way, we've enjoyed fabulous years from both of these fillies, and they've both given us so much, and they are fillies, so there's not as much on the line in a Horse of the Year title other than pride. But as far as going into the breeding shed for either of these fillies, a Horse of the Year title isn't, I don't think it's going to add as much as it would had they been a colt, but especially if their owners keep them and breed them on their own.
It's certainly going to add to the human connections, and
exactly.
Both of these
pride.
two fillies have just got fantastic human connections.
Owner Rick Porter talks about Kodiak Cowboy's eclipse potential and his Derby prospects.
Well, I think, in my opinion, obviously I'm a little biased, but, you know, he showed that he could beat the best horses at 3/4 of a mile, at 7/8 of a mile, and he beat some good horses, which I thought was a tremendous field in the Cigar Mile. You know, he beat Fabulous Strike twice, and Sensational obviously won some nice, you know, Grade 1 races. But I think if you look at the horses that he ran against, I don't think you could put him in the category, you know, of the horses that Kodiak beat. And I think that's the simplest way for me to look at it, that shows that he certainly should be, you know, a top contender for, you know, Sprinter of the Year.
You know, Rick, you've had a major say in the past few years as far as the Triple Crown is concerned, and with these 2-year-olds getting ready to turn 3 at the turn of the year, the first of next month, any names or big names you're excited about for potential Derby horses?
Well, I have one horse that I think that we have, you know, has a strong potential. He obviously, like they all do, have to go on and improve from here. He's only run 3 times. He hasn't won a stake. His name is Winslow Homer, which would be apropos, very apropos, since Winslow Homer was the famous artist who painted 8 bells.
NYRA President Charles Hayward discusses the way they've adjusted to the tough economic times.
The biggest change we made is that usually in our board meeting, a board of directors meeting in early December, we pass the entire stake schedule for a year. And we were putting the finishing touches on the stake schedule literally at the end of last week. And, you know, we were looking at making some changes. We're trying to figure out, you know, because our handle pretty much has been down 9–10% as it has pretty much across the country for the last 18 months. And we don't see anything that's changing that going forward. And, you know, just to create some perspective, last year our total purses that we dispersed were somewhere right around $110 million, and approximately $32 million of that were stakes purses. So, you know, with all the racing days that we have, the stakes program is a big deal. But by and large, Aqueduct is pretty much intact. But, you know, frankly, we don't run nearly as many, you know, graded stakes and big stakes at Aqueduct as we do, obviously, the rest of the year.
How long and what do you think will finally turn this thing around? Will it all turn around like along with the rest of the country once we all do rebound from this recession?
Yeah, I think that the biggest concern I have is the number of owners that have either cut back on the horses that they've owned or actually left the game. You know, owning horses is a tough economic proposition, and in most cases you really can't count on making money. And I think the liquidity issues that people faced and the fact that, you know, this is owning a horse is sort of a nice to have but not a necessary to have. So, you know, my wife's in the art business. She was just in Miami at Art Basel. She displayed there last year, and her gallery was there, and nobody was buying anything. And, you know, this year there's a big piece in the Times today about how it's rebounded. People are much more optimistic, people going into their pockets. So I think that, you know, horse racing, you know, like other high-end discretionary activities, you know, people need to feel a little bit more confident about what's going on. And that's really why we didn't release the stake schedule. I'm quietly optimistic that, at least here in the Northeast, that we're due for a nice little rebound.
Bill Kasner joined Lafitte and Scott to talk about WinStar's 2-year-old class.
Super Sabre, who shattered a stakes record at Churchill Downs in his last start, also for Todd Pletcher, and a speed horse that seems to have, he'll give you a second, maybe even a third move. Your thoughts on his performance at Churchill last week?
His race was just really very exciting to us. As you said, he's got tactical speed like Rule. He certainly just rebroke on him at the 8th pole, and that's something you always love to see. There's nothing like tactical speed. It's closest. It's the shortest trip to the wire. It gives you the opportunity to avoid trouble in a race, and but there's horses aren't always eligible to carry their speed over a distance of ground, and it was certainly encouraging to see that he finished as strong as he did.
How important is it to you to see him win at Churchill Downs in a big race like that as well?
Oh, that's absolutely. He's certainly shown that he has an affinity for the course, and that's absolutely huge.
Penny, for your thoughts when you saw the 23-1 46-3 going up the backside.
We certainly thought it might be a little bit quick, but he certainly responded when he was asked to run in the lane.
Going back to 06, you've been represented in the first Saturday in May, or on the first Saturday in May, in the big race. Bluegrass Cat, of course, being the best, finished with a second in 06. How important is it to you, Bill, and the WinStar name to be there on a year-in, year-out basis if you can?
Well, of course, the Kentucky Derby is the holy grail of racing, and if you can, first of all, if you're there on the first Saturday in May, it shows that you have one of the best colts in the country, and it's our program is to develop stallions, and of course if you can breed and race a Kentucky Derby winner, that's certainly that's the hallmark of that's the top credential for a stallion in the breeding shed. This is probably at this point in time, this is probably as strong a group of 2-year-olds as we've ever had.
John Avello of the Wynn Las Vegas talks Derby future pools on Against the Odds.
Churchill just wrapped up their 09 fall meet, and we saw a couple of Stars of Tomorrow programs. Speaking of that, 3-year-olds in Kentucky, first Saturday in May. What do you got?
We got a long list of horses. We've probably got close to 300 horses on our Derby list. There's a couple of horses been taking money lately. Buddy Saint, of course, the horse has won a couple of graded races back in New York. He's one of the favorites, along with looking at Lucky, and a horse that I thought was phenomenal in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Although he didn't get there, he was in some sort of trouble and still got second easily. Could have won that race. I thought he could have won that race without the trouble. But they're your two favorites. They're both short. They're both the 10 to 12 to 1 range, which is low for this time going, for a race in May. But I have to adjust according to money, and we have plenty of money on both of those horses.
Delta Downs track announcer Don Stevens helps preview Delta Jackpot Night.
Got a good friend who's a sports editor at a newspaper over in Southeast Texas. His brother is a TV weatherman over in Beaumont, and last night he was sending me texts saying it's going to be 2 to 4 inches, and I said, oh, come on, no way. Right now they said there's 2 inches in South Houston, and that's coming our way, so it's possible.
One nice horse that many have been focusing on is Rule, the WinStar homebred, who won the local prep, the Jean Lafitte. Tell us about that performance.
Oh, visually it was very, very impressive. He was on the lead, and he wasn't pressed too hard, a little early. Then he started to take off, and when he hit the lane, Corey Lannery tapped him a time or two, and it looked like he just jumped in the race. I mean, this is a fast, improving horse. Of course, Todd Pletcher is going to get a lot of attention. The horse broke his maiden up at Belmont Park, then came to Delta Downs. And some horses like our track, some don't. You know, it's a small track, tight turns, kind of a sandy track, but he just relished it. And the way he finished up, and he set a track record, which is, you know, fastest mile in 36 years this track's been open. To me, it was just very impressive. If he's pressed, that could affect his game. Johnny Velasquez rode him up in New York for 3 before Lannery rode him, and now Velasquez is back. Velasquez has ridden in this race before. He hasn't ever won it. But I don't know. I just see a horse who's improving by leaps and bounds in his last 2 races. Look at his workouts at Churchill. He's working a hole in the wind up there. So, and Pletcher was quoted as saying he's training better than ever. So I got to say he's got a huge chance. He's my pick in there.
Jeff and Aaron come up with some big winners for Delta Jackpot Night.
Now, I don't know whether Rule is a need-to-lead type. You talked about a horse breaking the track record. That's what Rule did in his most recent start. He came down from New York. He showed up in the stakes race here at Delta. This is the Jean Lafitte. And he was able to establish the pace here. The fractions were legit. And then when he was asked to run, this Todd Pletcher trained colt just drew off. He's going to be ridden out.
He's a magic horse. Watch the field disappear.
That's true. And again, we mentioned breaking the track record with a 97 Beyer number. So now the question is, does he need to lead? If he can sit second or third because there's other speed, I think he'll do it again. So I like Rule over maybe a long shot chance with Litigation Risk, who is a sharp recent maiden winner from New York as well. But Rule, to me, runs back to that race. Going to be hard to beat.
Coming for home, and right now we have a 2-horse race. It is John Velasquez going to work aboard Rule. To the outside, it's Uh-Oh Bango and Glenn Corbett. It's a match race at the top of the lane. 2.5 lengths back to Oakmont, who's desperately trying to catch up. They're coming to the 16th pole. Rule is digging in. Uh-oh Bango to the outside. Then comes Oakmont. They're coming to the finish. Rule is gutting it out, and Rule will win the Delta Jackpot Stakes.
I mean, Quiet Temper has got a real good chance at a price. I mean, she's coming in from Belmont Park. She's a maiden, but don't let that fool you. This is a filly by Quiet American who can run, trained by Dale Roman. She, too, I think, has the closing style. They hold her up. Very dangerous. 8-1 in the morning line. I might have to get some of that.
I like the outside horse Quiet Temper. 8-1 on the morning line for the 8. And usually if you're looking for a little R&R, you can get some wins with Robbie and Romans. Dale trains and Robbie Alvarado rides. Quiet Temper looks to be coming into this race in a peak form. It looks to be a peak race to me. And at 8-1 on the morning line, the jockey-trainer combo just too sharp to ignore.
It's Quiet Temper going at it with Truth and Justice, and the maiden Quiet Temper has taken the lead. Back in second now is Truth and Justice. Fading here is Layla, who is in third, and then comes Bella Diamante trying to rally, and on the outside it's Drooman Prince, but they're into the stretch. Quiet Temper is opened up by 5. Bella Diamante has moved into second. On the outside it's Drooman Prince, but this year's Delta Princess Stakes goes to Quiet Temper and Robbie Alvarado.
Jeff's best bet pays off in the Big Easy.
We're looking for a best bet of the weekend, sponsored by visitlasvegas.com. Cue camera, Segan, we need a winner.
Well, I'm going to go down to the fairgrounds for their feature race, and I'm going to go with the New York Shipper, trained by Christophe Clement. Her name is Akalina, and she arrives in peak form. She ran a good state-bred company in New York, shows up at the fairgrounds. She has plenty of pace to set it up for a closer. And I think she can sit back and blast home. On numbers, she's the best horse. Got the style, and that long stretch that they have at fairgrounds for grass horses is really going to help Akalina. I think she wins the Pego Hop Stakes at Fairground.
Ask But I Don't Tell is coming. Around horses now switched out, and then farther back to Akalina into the stretch. 3/4 in 1:15 and 2. It's Akalina. Akalina's emerged in front. Ask But I Won't Tell under pressure. Dancing Perfect charging stand side. Ask But I Won't Tell got squeezed back. Inside the final 16th. Dancing Perfect battles Akalina. Dancing Perfect Akalina in a bob in the Pego up Akalina. Akalina and Sean Bridgman. A narrow winner over Dancing Perfect.
Trainer John Gosden joins Scott and myself on Across the Board.
I've trained a lot on the synthetic, whether you call it pro ride, polytrack, it's a very similar concept to Peter, whatever. And the thing I found about it is very kind on horses. the attrition rate, the injury rate is much lower. That has been my experience. And also when it rains, of course, as happened in Monmouth, sadly, in the Breeders' Cup 2 years ago, you don't have to deal with sloppy tracks, which tends to get slightly one-dimensional racing. But what we like about them, obviously from our point of view, is that in dirt racing on the whole, quite often the first quarter is run faster than the last quarter. Speed from the gate position, and those huge, powerful gallopers dominate that division. And I think Curlin, to me, is one of the greatest dirt horses I've ever seen, because he could just grind up his opposition and literally spit them out and just go through that race with such power. And I think where you have on the dirt, if a horse is clear, you often think that horse is closing and finishing, but actually the horse in front is tiring and coming back. It's slightly an optical illusion. You don't find in dirt races over 1.25 miles, the last quarter run faster than the first quarter. Whereas when you come to race on this surface, it's like turf, that if a horse is in the right position, turning for home, and they are trained as European horses are to put in this burst of speed at the end, which we define as class, a very high cruising speed to really travel. See the Stars as a very good example is, and then just destroy your opposition in the last quarter. That's what we train him for. This surface suits that, because you've got spring, you put your foot down, you know exactly where there is. There's no cuppiness, there's no movement, and you can really get the leverage to accelerate. And obviously the plan in the Classic always was that we were drawn beside Curlin, and I told Frankie very clearly, you track him. You just track him. He's the best galloper in America, in the world. You track him. But if you're still on his tail and traveling with a horse under you, coming into the straight, you will do him for one thing on this surface: speed.
To prepare for the Japan Cup Dirt, Jeff and Aaron give their tips for betting foreign races.
First thing I try to do when I'm talking about handicapping a stakes race overseas, or any race really, is to try to isolate the quote-unquote class of the field. If you can see who's been running in the best races, and that's usually easy to determine by looking at the graded stakes races, or the designations that indicate races are stakes or designations. It's pretty easy to figure out. You can kind of isolate those kinds of horses and maybe separate them from the others who maybe haven't been running in the best races. But more importantly than that, really in this day and age with the internet, you can actually go on the internet and get information. Try to read as much as you can about these horses. For example, if you're talking about wagering English races or Irish races, racingpost.com or attheraces.com, all the information you're ever going to need to handicap those races in terms about form and videos and just commentaries and everything you need, it's there if you want to work that hard and research it. So just do as much research as you can on the internet. And again, these internet sites also have video, so watch the races as well. You can read about them, but it's better if you watch them. So it's not easy if you don't know the horses, but the information is usually available if you want to put in the work.
I'm going to touch on a couple of things you said, and then one more that I think is very important, whatever you're doing as far as betting on thoroughbred racing. First of all, inform yourself, like Jeff said. Information is key, knowledge is power, and when you bet, you want to bet with confidence, and a lot of people don't have a lot of confidence when they're playing international racing. Another thing that I want to make sure that you understand that I think is that the odds mean much less on international races than they do on U.S. races if you're mainly a U.S. handicapper and bettor. You'll see horses much less of a price if they're favored, and much more of a price. You'll see overlays time and time again go to the winner's circle because the uninformed bettor will side with the favorites, and the favorites don't always win. Last but not least, you got to keep it fun. One of the best parties I ever went to was when everybody put in 20 bucks that was attending the party. Numbers were drawn out of the hat. $2 was placed to win on every Australian horse in the race, and if you had the number, you got the win money. It was a great time. There was no handicapping, but you still had interest in the race.
That's all for this week on HRTV. Here's a look at what's coming up next week.
Rule. To the outside, it's Bango and Glenn Corbett. It's a match race at the top of the lane. 2.5 lengths back to Oakmont, who's desperately trying to catch up. They're coming to the 16th pole. Rule is digging in. Bango to the outside. Then comes Oakmont. They're coming to the finish. Rule is gutting it out, and Rule will win the Delta Jackpot Stakes.